he introduced virtual reality in training, which resulted in savings for the company for over 8 million. He has experience working or flying with 78 different types of aircrafts. Now, I'm wondering if that includes Concorde as well.
Well, the funny thing about Concorde is I did actually go on Concorde, but only on the ground. But some of the odd things I noticed is that the windows are only 4 inches square. And also you couldn't stand up in the seat. You had to bend down to get out onto the aisle. So if you're going to use data analytics to monitor and watch all your staff 24/7, that's not going to work. But if you use the analytics to look at your customer base and see what's happening with them, yes, that's useful, and that can make service better, and it can encourage staff to do a better job. So it's how it's going to be used is the big question, I believe, anyway, 2 years. And it's amazing how Boeing are now building a drone that could carry 4 passengers 100 miles. And then while I was looking through the internet, I came across a game called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes.
Thank you so much for joining in, Brendan.
It's a pleasure to be here, and welcome to all the viewers as well.
Thank you so much. For all our viewers, today we have Brendan, who is the founder of Strategic Leadership Consultancy. You can go and look at his work on www.strategicleadershipconsultancy.com. For everybody, I'm going to be providing his links in the description. So please go ahead and find out more about Brendan's work.
Sure.
Well, for Brendan, he has spent 40 years working in aviation. And during this time, he has worked with 3 of the best airlines of the world: Gulf Air, Emirates Airlines, and then Qatar Airlines, which is amazing. With Gulf Air, he was section head customer awareness. Then with Emirates, where he was Senior Vice President Learning and Development. And after Emirates, he worked with Qatar Airways in Doha as Head of Talent Development. Now, the notable thing here is that during his time with Qatar, he introduced virtual reality in training, which resulted in savings for the company for over $8 million. And as a result of this VR implementation, so which is one step into the world of AI, I guess.
Yeah, the virtual reality was new, and we weren't sure how we could get it to work. But I'll talk about it maybe a bit later on when you finish the introduction of how that all came about.
Great, thank you so much. That'll be awesome. And of course, Brendan has worked with global organizations, governments, and other companies. And now, very recently, he's been consulting on behalf of the PwC. So we have a lot of rich experience that Brendan brings in over 40 years that he has worked. But that's not the end. There's some very interesting facts that I want to share with everybody. He has experience working or flying with 78 different types of aircrafts. Now, I'm wondering if that includes Concorde as well.
Well, the funny thing about Concorde is I did actually go on Concorde, but only on the ground. In the early days, I worked in a travel agency, and they brought us to Heathrow to see Concorde. Beautiful airplane, and really one of the most dynamic aircraft ever built. But some of the odd things I noticed is that the windows are only 4 inches square. So you really couldn't see out very much because of the pressurization and the altitude that it flew on. They couldn't have big windows. And also you couldn't stand up in the seat. You had to bend down to get out onto the aisle. So while it was a super airplane, there were some limitations as well.
Great. I mean, that's great information. I did not know that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, she doesn't fly anymore for various reasons, but it was the only aircraft that ever flew at supersonic speed in the commercial arena. But what's interesting is in the 1950s, the average speed of an aircraft the jet aircraft was 500 miles an hour. Today, the average speed of an aircraft is 580 miles an hour. So in that period of time, we've only gone up about 80 miles an hour.
Yeah, I guess it could have created a future if it was still there.
Yeah, but it talks about new ones coming out. So let's see. Maybe we'll have supersonic back again.
Probably. And he has traveled across half the globe, to 127 destinations, which is 7 times the moon and back, which just blew my mind.
Yeah, it was funny. I worked with a
Yeah.
great guy when I was at Qatar Airways who was a data
Uh-huh.
analyst. And he said
Okay.
to me, he had a problem. He was doing a training program, but he didn't have enough data for people to work on. And I said, well, since I started flying, I've always made notes of all the planes I've flown on and where I've flown to. He said, let me have it. So he basically took it away, and it was great. It worked for his program. But then he came back and did a summary of the number of flights I've traveled, the destinations I've been to, how many times around the world, how many times to the moon and back. And it was just, I was shocked. I never realized how much traveling I did. So it's another part of the future of AI is analytics, and I think all of us should pay more attention to that.
Absolutely. I mean, that's amazing that you could just use it for yourself, if not for an organization. That's very,
Yeah,
very creative, I think. Yeah.
yeah,
We're so totally honored to have you on the Real Talk today, Brendan. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation.
you're very welcome.
Thank you. So let's dive straight in. And there's so much that I really want to talk to you.
Sure.
Um, Especially, when we started off talking about how this data analytics bit was used for your personal experiences, and of course, it must have just, on the first sight, it would have just blown your mind.
Yeah, and it kind of brought home to me the importance of data analytics. I was never a person who enjoyed going through mountains and mountains of data. I just found it so tedious. But
Uh-huh.
with artificial intelligence, which is coming along now, we'll have
Hmm.
easier access to data. And I think when you work in the L&D business or you work in any business, the fact that you can look at data that tells you what's actually happening in your business and you can get it in real time. You don't have to wait months for somebody to go through reams and reams and reams of Excel sheets. I think that that's a good advantage. One of the big benefits of AI is it can get rid of a lot of the tedious jobs that are out there and allow us to get more information quicker, which I think would be a big, big bonus.
Yeah, that's true. And I remember that in just 2019, everyone in every kind of industry out there was talking about digital transformation, and it
Mm.
was, the buzzword then. But
Yeah.
in less than 4 years, we are talking about a digital transformation, which is a massive leap to AI, more like a revolution rather than a transformation, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it's happening very quick. I think that that's why we call it a revolution. And like all good things, AI, virtual reality, all of that is great in the business as long as we use it the right way. That's the key. If you're going to use data analytics to monitor and watch all your staff 24/7, that's not going to work. But if you use the analytics to look at your customer base and see what's happening with them, yes, that's useful, and that can make service better, and it can encourage staff to do a better job. So it's how it's going to be used is the big question, I believe, anyway. And I think
Yeah, it has to be. Yeah.
with
Go ahead.
digitalization, it is becoming part of day-to-day business. And I think for anybody listening or watching us today, it is worth looking at that field because that is the future. And I'll talk a little bit later on where I see the big job opportunities for the future in relation to that.
Yeah, it's very interesting because it has to be towards the business goals. The use of AI has to be towards business goals and what the business would like to achieve. What does it mean for the airline industries? I mean, I'm talking about all the areas because flying an aircraft is just not a pilot. There are so many different departments that come together to make an aircraft fly. So, what do you think about the implementation in airline?
Right. There's some good examples. About 8 years ago, I was doing a presentation talking about the future of L&D. And one of the things that caught my eye
Mm-hmm.
was a new concept called Alias. And Alias is a robotic
Oh,
pilot. And I was shocked because this pilot could fly an airplane. So they got him to fly a light aircraft and then they got him to fly in a simulator. And they said, this guy has potential to be a first officer on flights. I found it very scary because, I like to see two real people up the front managing my aircraft. Um, but what was really interesting is Alias got a job. He got a job in the US military. So he is now flying in helicopters with other pilots. He's also flying helicopters on his own, or it could be a she, I don't know. But Alias, the robot, has actually progressed now. I don't see it coming into commercial aviation because I really don't think the general public would accept it. I know Cathay
yeah.
Pacific, for example, has been promoting the idea of a one-man cockpit for in the next 5 years. Total disaster. Who'd fly on it? But then when you say to people, well, what about cargo airplanes? Oh, yeah, let them fly on the cargo airplanes. That's okay, but don't let them on the passenger airplanes. So, I don't know. I mean, in one way, it's scary, but in another way, maybe it is the future. But I don't see it personally, not in my lifetime. I don't think the general public would accept the fact that you've only got one person up the front looking after the aircraft, and particularly when aircraft are getting bigger all the time. So,
Yeah.
great job in the military, but I think we'll keep them there.
Yeah, because my next thought was what happens to the safety, the reliability, all of those things,
Well,
because we're
what
humans
they
at
say,
the end.
you ask any analyst how good it is robots, and they'll tell you they're brilliant. They never make mistakes, but trust me, they can make mistakes too. But if we come back to your question, if we look at the other areas of aviation, I think where AI will really help is stuff like baggage tracing,
Yes,
baggage planning, cargo planning,
yes,
areas which can be a bit tedious and can be quite involved. I think those areas AI will certainly help. And then I feel people say, well, hang on a minute, that's what I do. So what am I going to do
yes,
for it? Well,
yes.
there are options. What I would say to people today is take
Hmm.
an interest in what's happening in AI, see what it's all about. So you have things like data analytics. Some people love numbers. And if you have
Hmm.
somebody who can understand and relate to data analytics, well, if they learn and study data analytics and become an expert in it, well, that could be very useful for the future for them. Similarly, robotics. Robots are coming in, whether we like it or not. They're going to turn up everywhere. But with robots, I think we're going to need people to manage and maintain them. So there's another opportunity there for people to understand electronics and to understand, the concept of where to use robots and so on. So that's another future opportunity for people. Um, and I really feel that people shouldn't be afraid of this. It will be managed. Nobody's going to be silly and suddenly change their whole business, particularly the airline business, to be completely automated and managed by robots. That'll never happen. Customers wouldn't accept it. But where there are tedious jobs and difficult jobs and unpleasant jobs, well, maybe that's where we could use stuff like that to make it easier for everybody else. But certainly for the listeners today, I would say data analytics, robotics, and the new one that's getting really, really interesting is drones. Now,
Yeah.
I didn't know too much about drones, but I've studied a bit about it in the last 2 years. And it's amazing how Boeing are now building a drone that could carry 4 passengers 100 miles. Now, they don't want
Yes,
to
I
use,
remember that.
yeah, so they don't want to use passengers. What they want to do is carry cargo, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So imagine you had an aircraft that came into a cargo field. Instead of having loads and loads of trucks everywhere polluting the atmosphere, you could have electric drones flying within 50 to 100-mile range, dropping off the cargo to the customer who requested it. So there's another element. Have a look at drones. And funny enough, I bought myself a drone about 6 months ago. And it took me a while to get the basics of it, but now I've got the hang of it. Brilliant piece of equipment. And again, get to know drones, buy a drone, get familiar with it, understand how they operate, see what they can do, and then maybe you'll be able to understand the mechanics of it, and maybe you can fix them. So I do feel there's opportunities for everybody to just touch into these areas themselves on a small scale, just so they become familiar with what could be out there in the future.
Yeah, that's right. Very recently, I had an experience at one of the European biggest and busiest European airport, where even the security staff was reduced. Like I did not see the security staff in such huge numbers where I usually see in large and busy airports.
Mm.
So we are definitely looking at reduced workforce. Also, automated baggage drops and printing your own boarding passes. All of these things have started to become normal in most of the airports. There's a lot of automation that is going on because all of this is still controlled by human beings,
Yeah.
right? So even if you have less security staff facing the passengers, there's a lot happening at the back end, right?
Yeah, there is really. I mean, if you think about it, yes, there's less security staff at the airport, but I can guarantee you that in a room somewhere at the airport, you'll have 20 or 30 guys monitoring cameras, checking systems, because now what they've done with security is they have lots of sensors around the airport, which can sense if there's people bringing large amounts of money. They can sense if there's drugs in the baggage. So the security presence doesn't need to be on the spot. With the advantage of the new electronic systems that they have, they can track a lot of that stuff and see it. And even today, many of the bags that go into the hold of an aircraft are scanned before they go into the hold of an airplane because technology allows them to do it now. So people think, oh, I hope my baggage is safe. Well, they don't need to worry because these guys now have systems that can help them to do all the right things very, very quickly and very, very safely. So there is an advantage with the technology that it's helping all of us be safer. But as you said, you thought, well, where are all the security people? But they're there. Trust me. They haven't gone away.
Yeah, that's crazy. And when it comes to the people who are unfortunately they're losing their jobs, their current jobs at airports and other areas, they're constantly hunting for, okay, what should we do to upskill ourselves? So are airlines really focusing on upskilling their workforce, or it's about implement the technology, get rid of people?
It's a difficult question, and it depends on the airline. For instance, low-cost airline staff are not a consideration. They use them and abuse them and throw them away. They don't need them. Quality airlines realize that you need to have professional, experienced people. And I find it funny now when I go into, and I've traveled to many different airports, when you go to airports at the moment where they have automatic check-in that you do yourself, I've never seen any of those systems without at least 2 or 3 staff in the area to help people use the system. So whatever people think about systems can manage themselves and customers will understand how to use them, the reality is no, they don't. A lot of people don't like it. I remember many years ago when they first introduced self-check-in at Heathrow, for instance, in London. They did a survey with the passengers and said, what do you think? Do you like the system? They said, well, the reason we like the system is it can't be rude to us. And that really, I thought, wow, there's a message here coming out from the customer saying, look, be nice to us, help us, guide us, show us what to do, but don't be difficult with us. Otherwise, we'll just get a machine and deal with the machine and manage. So I think there is a message there. But for most of the quality airlines, people are important. For the low-cost airlines or budget airlines, people aren't so important, and automation is a cheaper way of doing the job. But for the people who are working at airports today, I would say, look, don't worry about the future. You'll always be needed in some way or another. And what you do is you upskill yourself. Don't wait for your airline or your company that you work for to upskill you because it might not happen. You've got to say to yourself, let me find out about what's going on. There's so much information at the moment on the internet, on Google, about AI, what's happening, what the future is. The real story I'm hearing at the moment is that AI is going to be really helpful, but we won't see much direct improvements for the next 4 or 5, maybe 6 years. Once that comes, then we'll see a lot of changes. So everybody's got 4 or 5 years to sort of gear themselves up, get to understand, and then find what could I do to help AI work? How would I benefit the organization by learning about different fields and getting to understand those fields so that when it comes, I can be a useful person for the business to say, right, I can help you with that. So don't fear it. Don't fight against it. Learn what you can do to contribute towards it. And then that secures your future.
That's true. So the reality is that it's knocking our door. The sooner we hear that knock and start doing something about it, it is going to be better for us. So there are a lot of these different courses and certifications that are out there. How can people align their goals to what kind of certifications they should go through? Like for example, in India itself, if you look at the kind of data analytics training that is out there, there are hundreds of organizations that are giving you these trainings and certifications and telling you, hey, if you have just this, you'll be able to do, all of that. So, there's a lot of confusion in terms of, okay, so where do we go? Who's the right person? How do we find that this is going to align to what we want to do?
Well, what I would suggest is that whichever organization you go with to be trained, Look at their credentials. Are they a well-known organization? Do they have a history of working with some of the top companies in the world? Or are they just somebody who set up an operation to try and make some quick money? The reality is, yes, you pay a bit more for quality, but trust me, it adds more value to you as an individual if you have your training done with the right organizations. And as I said, choose the well-known ones, choose the ones that have a reputation, maybe ones that have connections with the US or with Europe, because all of those will know what's happening with AI. But you've got to inform yourself first. You've got to start reading about AI. You've got to understand what the benefits are. You've got to look at the other areas, as I mentioned, drones, um, uh, the data analytics. All of these areas are really, really interesting. But the key is, what are you passionate about? So if you say, well, I hate numbers, don't go into data analytics. It's not going to work. But people will, and they'll spend all that money and they'll hate it. What you do is find
Yeah.
something that you are comfortable with and think, right, this is the area that I like working in. This is the, the enjoyment I get out of this area, and I'm passionate about it. And you will find something that suits that and work with it. So if you like dealing with customers, well, maybe what you could do is you could look at, okay, how do we contribute towards customer service using AI, find out what's happening in the business. And let's say there's a lot of stuff out there of people planning to do stuff in the aviation business. Find out who's doing what, learn more about it, and then think, okay, how can I contribute to this? But don't
Mm.
take a shot in the dark. Don't just say, okay, tomorrow I'm going to do this or tomorrow I'm going to do that. Do your research. Find out
Yeah.
what's happening. Find out what you're passionate about, and then when you put those together, you'll have the right solution.
That's absolutely right. Um, there's this customer facing part of aviation, and then there is a non-customer facing part of the aviation, which is very highly technical.
Yeah,
So we're talking about, the people in cargo. We're talking about people who are actually handling your baggage down there. We are also talking about people who are monitoring airlines, the nerve center of the aviation.
yeah.
So in those areas, what kind of changes have you noticed in
Okay.
all of these
In,
years?
in terms of what we call network control, which is like the
Yeah.
NASA of an airline, the more advanced airlines, I've looked at some of their systems, absolutely out of this world. They know where every aircraft is at any given time. They even have now computers on engines, and they will tell network control before the pilots know that there's a problem coming with the engines. So this is all data analytics, and it's also a little bit of AI. But the reality is that helps keep the operation going, right? So the guys who work in network control have suddenly got all this information that they've never had before to help them do a better job and to reduce the disruption for the customers. So there are bits and pieces happening out there. In cargo, you're finding now that there's a far better system for tracking and identifying where cargo is and where it's going. Again, we never had this in the past. We had to send people down on the ramp running around looking to see where the containers were. But nowadays, they don't need to do that. They don't need to step out into the cold and the freezing or the hot and sweaty weather. They can actually do it in an office because they have systems that guide them on it. So it is there and it'll grow, but it'll take away the tedium and the unknown, really. It'll make everything a lot easier. I mean, I remember from my days working at the airport, if somebody lost a bag, you could spend 3, 4, 5 hours wandering around warehouses looking for a customer's bag. Today, you don't need to do that. Most airports, most systems are pretty good. They'll be able to say, right, we know it's in A, B, C, or D area, and that just reduces everybody's time. So it makes somebody's job a lot easier. So again, the advantage that it makes people's jobs easier. Yes, there will be some replacement of people because systems will get more intelligent and better at what they do, but then you still need people to manage that. The system can't work on its own. It needs people. So I would say to people, just keep an eye on what's happening, get familiar with it. And if you're in a job that you think is be eradicated in the future because of AI, well, then start planning now about where you go to next and what you're going to do next. And that's really what it is. Don't wait for things to change. Get moving yourself and look at the opportunities.
Brendan, would you like to tell a little bit more about the VR implementation in Qatar?
Yeah, that was a really interesting project and story. I had a great guy called Himanshu Joshi working with me in Qatar. and he was our IT guy, but he was so interested in new technology. And he'd come and see me every now and again. So, Brendan, have you seen this? Have you seen that? He talked about artificial intelligence. So eventually he came to me and he said, look, have you looked at virtual reality? And I said, no. He said, look, I'll bring in a headset tomorrow and have a try of it. So we brought the headset in, and I was going around the world traveling with the VR system. And I thought, wow, this is really good, but is there anything there for training? So we looked at different things and we couldn't find anything. And then while I was looking through the internet, I came across a game called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. I thought that sounds a bit bizarre.
Okay.
I went into this game and it was very clever. What it was, it puts you into a room and it gives you a box in front of you, like a suitcase, and you open it up. And when you open it up, it's got a lot of wires, it's got a lot of elements in there that you have to figure out what it's all about. And the interesting thing is you have 4 minutes to defuse this bomb. Otherwise, the room just goes dark and then you've all disappeared. But they gave an instruction book with it that was so complicated. Um, you had to work out what all the signs meant. You had to work out the numerical order in order to do this. And if you spent long enough with it, you were able to defuse the bomb within 4 minutes. But I got thinking, I thought, wow, we could turn this into a L&D game. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, look, let's try it out on the trainers. So we got the trainers in, we put them in 4 or 5 groups, got them to go onto this system. It cost $10, the game. It was unbelievable. Keep talking and nobody explodes. So what we did is we said, right, we'll put on the headset, and 3 other colleagues would look at the manual. And what would happen is they couldn't see what was inside the virtual reality system. Only the guy with the headset could see. So he would say, right, what I'm seeing is this. I'm seeing 3 colors, red, blue, green, and they're looking through the book trying to figure out, well, where is it? It is there, but you have to find it. So first time round, everybody gets blown up. Then the next person that goes in puts the headset on and says, oh, now I know what you're talking about. Now I understand what you're saying because I've seen the symbols and now I see this. So by the time we got to the third person in the group, they were able to figure it out and say, right, here's what we need to do, and then you'd all be okay. So that's what started it. And then everybody in the L&D unit got really interested in VR. So what could we do next?
Right.
So Manchu said to me, Brendan, IATA in Geneva, who's the overseers of aviation generally, are working on a project in Geneva where they're building a virtual reality system. So the 2 of us flew up to Geneva, went to meet these guys. There was a great guy called Demetrius who was running the project. And we said, tell us what you've got. So he put us onto this system. And when you put the headset on, you were standing on the ramp at the airport. And in front of you was either a A320 or a Boeing 777. So the objective of this training was you had to do a turnaround check. So basically you had to walk around the aircraft. Was there any oil leaks? Was there any damage done to the airplane? Was there any items left on the ground that could get sucked into the engine? It was a whole scenario of different elements relating directly to an aircraft turnaround. And it was great. So we said, look, if you tweak this and tweak that and do a little bit here and do a little bit there. So Demetrius went away and said, right, I've done all of that. So then I said, look, how much is it? And it was really expensive. And I had the authority to buy up to, say, $20,000 worth of equipment. And this was 22. But we came to an agreement because we were the first people and we bought the system. So we brought it back to Doha, and then I invited a lot of the managers to come and have a look. Then I got the senior managers to come and have a look. Then I got the VPs, and then I got the SVPs, and everybody was blown away saying, wow, this is unbelievable. And then one of the funny things is eventually I got the chief of Qatar Airways, His Excellency Akbar, and I said to him, I wanted to come and see the system. And I was able to show him it all, and he was very impressed. So he said, yeah, I like it. It's very good. Do we have it? And I said, yeah, we're the first airline in the world to have this. He said, very good, very good. But my problem was, what do I do with it? So about 2 weeks later, the head of airport operations in Qatar Airways rang me up and said, Brendan, we've got a problem. We're getting a lot of aircraft damage on the network, and it's costing us a lot of money. What can we do? I said, come to my office. I want to show you something. So he came up and he nearly fell off the chair. He said, this is unbelievable. I said, I know. We knew this would be good. So we built a 3-day training program. And what we did is the first 2 days were all about airport operations and what needs to be done. And then the final day was standard operating procedures. But on the first day, we put everybody through the VR system and said, right, show us how you do an aircraft turnaround check. These are all station managers, so they were experienced people. And everybody had a different way of doing it. And their complaint was it takes too long. And we said, yeah, the reason it takes too long is you're going backwards and forwards and up and down. Do it in a circular motion and we'll show you what to do. So we standardized how every station manager on the network, all 279 of them, did their turnaround checks. And as a result of the VR, it was the thing that they all remembered. If you met anybody anywhere in the world and said, what do you remember in training? Said, well, that VR was something else. I still remember every part of it. And then because we brought that in and it had an emotional impact on everybody, they then went out and did a much better job than they used to. And that's how we saved $8 million in aircraft damage over the period of 12 months. It was unbelievable.
Oh,
And
oh
that's
my
why I
gosh.
believe that virtual reality training is the way to go. And another interesting part is we had Rolls-Royce Engineering came over to us and they were showing us their AI training system where they could show you an engine and you could turn it around on the table and look at it from different angles, but you couldn't do anything with it. So we said to them, look, AI is not the way forward, not yet. Focus on VR. So they went away and built a virtual reality training system for their engineers, and it's been a great success. So virtual reality, I believe, is where we should be today, and everybody should be working on it. So to start it off, all I will say to you is buy yourself a headset. They're not too expensive now, and download a game called Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. Do it yourself, talk about it, download the booklet, and you'll see how confusing it is. And then you'll understand how you can build a training program around it. And that'll get you started because in the next 2 years, virtual reality training is just going to go off the scale. It will be everywhere. And I think you need to be involved.
Amazing. Now, I'm also thinking that there is an opportunity for all the experts in that area to learn gamification on VR.
Yes.
And if they can do that and create those games based on their own expertise, that's going to be another, new opportunity altogether.
Yes, and the other element which is interesting is in the past it was very hard to do gamification by yourself. It was too expensive to get
Yes,
companies to do it.
yes,
But now there's loads of software out there which allows you to do it. Now, if you look at what
yeah,
IATA did, they basically turned an aircraft turnaround check into gamification. So what they did, which I thought was very clever, is that you would be on the headset at the airport doing all these checks, and there'll be a big screen in the classroom where everybody else can see what you're doing and see what you're seeing. So they understood. And you think, great, oh, I know what to check for now. And then when you put the headset on, it was a completely different scenario because they had 57 different scenarios that you come across. So each one was different. So if you had a class of 20 people, nobody gets the same experience. It's all different.
yeah.
So again, it teaches people that you can't just say, oh, yeah, I know what to expect, but you don't. Anything could happen. So they had it for aircraft turnaround. They had it for sorry, I can't think of terminology. But you know when they bring an aircraft in and the guy has the bats and he guides the aircraft. They had one of
Yeah.
those. A lot of fun because nobody ever got that right, and the plane would always go off on the left or go off on the right or stop too soon or come too far. So again, that was a bit of fun. And they also do one now which is really, really good about connecting the air bridge to the aircraft. Now imagine you can do all of this in a classroom in a very safe environment, and you don't damage
Yeah.
anything. Even if it goes wrong, there's no cost. If you did that in a live environment, imagine what would happen. You'd lose a job. You'd be fired because you did something wrong. In this way, you're learning in a very safe environment. And that's why I'm a big, big proponent of VR. I think it's one of the best ways to learn.
Yeah, it's the mini size simulator,
Yes,
aircraft
yeah. And
simulator in a
because it's
way.
learning in a very different way to what we normally learn, you remember it more than you'd remember any other type of training. And that's what's great about it. It
Yeah.
really has an impact.
Amazing. I think that's just totally new version of how anybody can look at not just learning, but also what are the different possibilities in the back end.
Yeah,
So to facilitate that learning, you need somebody to work on maybe an app or maybe a game or maybe the manual that is being created for it.
yeah.
So there are so many different opportunities that you already see in a very very small component of just doing learning, facilitating a learning process.
And another advantage is
So
think about
imagine.
what one of the biggest problems you have when you have a training group that you need to learn about airport operations, you have to get airport passes, you have to get clearances, you have to get them down to the
Yeah.
airport, you have to get through all the security. It takes time. You can do it all in the classroom, have a far bigger impact. And then when the guys get back to their operations, they know exactly what to do. So yeah, a good one to think about. And I'm sure most of your viewers will be
Yeah.
like I was. It was a brilliant project, and it was one of the most interesting things I've ever worked on. But again, it's just another
I'm
tool.
glad you told us about this, because this is like,
Again, if you go on the internet, you'll be able to see under IATA that you'll see some of the videos of this virtual reality training system. So you'll be able to have a look at it.
yes, yes, definitely. I'm gonna have a look, because this sounds extremely interesting. And then
Yeah.
I'm gonna search for other apps that are that with which we can create those
Right.
VR games.
Don't forget that one. It's $10. I hope it's still $10. It's probably gone up, but keep talking and nobody explodes. It's and you can do it with your
Yes,
family. I
I
mean,
wanna.
that's the nice thing about it. But the other side of it is you can actually turn it into an L&D program on communication. Why
Yeah,
are we getting all these problems? Why aren't we understanding what other people are doing? And as I said, once you put the headset on, you have a different perspective to the person just looking at the manual.
totally amazing. Thank
Yeah,
you so much
another
for
tool to
sharing
help
that.
people.
Yes, and exciting, and an exciting tool.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
you can be kids and still have learned something in a classroom.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, it's basically stop staying comfortable,
Yeah, in
start
a way.
becoming
And
comfortable.
for some of us, that is a problem. That we've been doing the same thing for many years. We do it in our sleep, and now suddenly we're starting to get a little bit jittery, saying, "Oh my goodness, what happens if?" Well, the reality
Yeah,
is, you start to find out what you're going to do next. Think to yourself, and most people should do this. In 2 years' time, I want to be where? What do I want to be doing? In 2 years after that, where will I be and what will I be doing? Don't just sit back and say, well, let's see what happens, because all that will happen is you'll get left behind.
yeah, exactly. I mean, you can't get away with the reality. I guess the future is here. The earlier we realize, the faster we are going to be ahead from everybody else. The only thing I see around right now is a lot of relaxed or comfortable uh, uh, thought process that most people have in different industries. And I'm not just talking about airlines, because that's the reason we even started this program, the Real Talk, because a lot of people feel if they are in a company for many years, they feel that, oh well, this job is important, it's not going to go away. But then that's far away from truth. It is going to go away if you do not update yourself or do something which is going to create a huge difference in the way the job is being done.
Yeah.
The same thing goes to all the customer facing people, and sitting there and just sort of accepting customers on a regular basis, thinking, uh, well, this cannot go away. This is going to stay because customers still need to be addressed to.
Mm.
The same goes for security staff. There are multiple new things that are coming, and they are going to get advanced as time passes,
Yeah.
because everybody is working on how to make a system more advanced and more effective in its
Yeah, of
current
course.
state.
Yeah, and reduce costs, which is what the airlines are looking at.
Absolutely
That's what you got
reducing.
to think about. But I
Yeah.
mean, in most organizations that I've worked in, they do have good learning and development units that do offer a lot of training. And some people I know and have experienced in the aviation business never go on a training program. And they're the people that say, well, what am I going to do for the future? Because this is all I know. Well, the reality is you've got to get off your backside and go and learn, find out what your organization is offering, and get in there and start learning all the different opportunities that you can learn about, because that's the way you move forward. So if you've never worked on an Excel sheet, go and do an Excel course, because that will help you understand a little bit about data analytics. There's a lot of opportunities that people can take, but they don't. But now I think people need to wake up and think, okay, things are going to change. My job could disappear in 5, 6, 7 years' time. So let me gear myself up so I'm more useful to the organization. And the way you do that is by increasing your skills, growing your own skills. And even if you can't do it with your own organization, do it with any organization that you can do it with, so that you can improve your capabilities. And that's really what it comes down to. Don't sit back and wait for it. Get up and do something. It's very important.
Do you think this is a little disheartening for newbies, people
No,
who dream about being in an aviation
no, not
business?
really. If you think about it in some ways, newbies love technology. Okay, it drives me mad when you see them always on their phone. They live on their phones. So for them to get involved in technology will be something they probably love and think, wow, more technology. I really enjoy this. So I really think for the new people coming into the business, there won't be too many issues, really. There is a career. There's lots of opportunities. Airlines will never be without people. They can't.
Yeah.
Airlines grow around people. Airlines need people. And all the differences is the roles that people have within that organization.
Mm, that's true. That's absolutely true. Well, thank you so much for giving such valuable information, Brendan. Any last words for our aviation enthusiasts?
Okay, just talking about data analytics. Okay, here's a really interesting story. A couple of years ago, I heard about Watson, which was a data analytics system built by IBM. And when they first put it together, people said, "What's the point? It's too expensive. Who'd want to use it?" But what I was absolutely amazed at is they came up with this system called Dr. Watson. And what they did is they captured all the information, medical information, over the last 70 years of everything that's ever been done and put it all into this system. Okay? So today, you could go to Dr. Watson. We can't, organizations can, but you can go to Dr. Watson and say, right, I have a patient. Here are the symptoms. Here's what they're telling me. What's wrong with them? And Dr. Watson will get it right to within 70% of what's wrong with that person. If you went to the average doctor, 20 to 30%, he'll get it right. So what's happening is that system in the near future will now be available to all doctors across the globe, where they can go in and say, I've got a customer or a patient, you call them patients, don't they? And here's what his symptoms are. And imagine what that will do for World Health.
Yeah,
Now, there's
that's true.
no way any doctor, no matter how brilliant they are, would have that amount of information available or know that amount of information. But if it goes onto a system and interrogates the system to see what the issues are, wow. So there are
Yeah.
positive elements to it. But Dr. Watson didn't happen by accident. People had to input data. People had to verify what was happening. People had to check in different parts of the world. So imagine the workforce that was needed to bring all that data together. And those guys have been in employment for at least the last 10 years and probably for the next 20 to 30 years. So don't be afraid of it. That's what I would say to people. There are lots of really big advantages. What you have to do is change your mindset. It's about you. What do you want out of life? What do you want to achieve? And how adaptable are you? And if you're willing to be adaptable and you're willing to change what you're doing now to do something that's a bit more positive in terms of your knowledge gaining and so on, well, then you won't have a problem with the future. But if you sit back and wait for things to change, be careful.
Yes, that's too bad.
Well,
Stay uncomfortable.
another example is Amazon Prime. They
Yes.
set up supermarkets in the USA. I remember the first one they ever built was about 6 years ago, where you walked in, you scanned your phone as you went into the supermarket. You didn't pay for anything. You just pick items up, you dropped them in your basket, you went around, and when you were finished, you just walked out of the store. Now,
Yeah.
people think
Yeah.
that's
I
crazy.
just read about it recently.
Right. So people say that'll never work. People will steal stuff. No, it doesn't happen. It really doesn't happen. And again, if you look on Google and tap in Amazon shopping and see what comes up, you'll see the videos about this. But they started off with one store and it was brilliant. But what made me laugh is that when they opened up the first store, the queue went 5 blocks down the street. So while the customers thought they were getting a much better, quicker system, reality with everybody else.
Yeah.
But now they've opened more stores. I think there's about 2,000 now in the USA. So again,
Mm,
people thought, oh, that's the end of people working in supermarkets. But what happened was they took away the tedium of working at a checkout, which can be very difficult for people dealing with some difficult customers, and they automated it all. But in the background, behind the scenes, they had people who were making sure all supplies were there. They were verifying that the customers who used their phone were the people who they said they were, and they were making sure that the bills were correct. So there was a lot of work
yes.
required in the background, as we call it, rather than in the front. and that helped make it all work. So don't be afraid of it. It'll be good for everybody, and there will be opportunities, but you have to be adaptable.
Great. Thank you so much. I'm sure it's going to mean a lot to all the aviation
I hope
people
so.
who are there.
It's great that people are looking at these programs and getting to learn from it. And that's what I would say to them. The key is develop yourself. You have opportunities, check your organization, see what they're offering. Be amazed what people have on offer, and yet you probably weren't aware of it. So develop yourself, grow your skills, and then you will be valuable to any organization.
Thank you so much for those examples that you shared with us. I'm sure this is going to be very, very valuable. And again, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure to have you on the
So
Real
that's it.
Talk.
It's a pleasure talking to you as always. Thank you for doing this, and for educating everybody, because that's really important.
Great. Thank you so much for your time, Brendan. And I'll see you again.
Sure. Catch up soon. All the best, everybody.
Yeah.